Slowly and steadily, 450 head of cattle make their way across a stretch of river in Queensland's North Burnett region. It's quite the spectacle, and what seems like the whole town has turned out to take a look. The mob is surrounded by a team of drovers, but not the usual kind. They're ordinary people tackling a big challenge, keeping the spirit of droving alive, and alongside it, the quiet country town of Eidsvold.
I don't know what it is, but walking behind a mob of cattle along a dirt road, it just brings out stories and life, and yeah, it's amazing actually. Yeah, it's good therapy.
The Eidsvold Cattle Drive brings together people of all ages and ability on an adventure unlike any other in the country. For 7 days, alongside a team of very slick horsemen and women, the apprentice drovers are broken in. Over 70 kilometres, they take a trip back in time, spending long hours in the saddle day after day, riding in unfamiliar country behind a mob of cattle. It's a journey made easier under the capable command of boss drovers Bruce Tighe and Graham Pott. Two men absolutely committed to the end goal and to ensuring a little fun is had along the way.
What's kind of the nuts and bolts of the cattle drive?
To get a mob of cattle from out there into town and make sure we get the whole lot in.
The journey begins in Eidsvold itself, a fairly typical rural town that, like many others, has seen its share of good years and some not so good.
Well, we're on the headwaters of the Burnett River, which goes out to Bundaberg. Started off with mines and gold and that sort of thing, but they opened this country up to pastoralism and then later on in life, population sort of come in here with the railways and dairying was a big thing for a while, and cotton was a big thing. Now it's just about down to pastoralism, grain. That's about it now, I guess.
Day one sees the participants arriving to the showgrounds. Some are in pairs or small groups, but many are riding solo. They bring their own horses, which they'll ride on the drive.
Everyone's very nervous to begin with, which is understandable. Like, new place, their horses can feel and they know that they're at a different place.
Kathleen Roth is part of the crew that runs the event. Her job is to help the group come together to work just as a team of drovers would.
So I just try and watch their horses mainly, see how they're reacting with other horses, and with the riders I just sort of see how well they can ride.
There are 26 participants for this year's drive. They saddle up for a test ride first, both to calm the nerves and to get a feel for what this country is like.
I'm from Brisbane, so I haven't been on a cattle drive before. But we have done cattle clinics and stuff at beginner level, so she has had a lot of exposure to that. So this is just a bit of a big adventure for us to give a crack at and see how she copes.
I'm from Caboolture and Cherie's at Mount Sampson, so northwest of Brisbane. It's a great experience to be able to, I guess, follow in the footsteps of what was done previously and a bit of that heritage stuff and history, and, you know, now you're helping out as well and bring some money into the local community.
But the weather wasn't playing nice. Day one was a total washout. The silver lining, though, which is always worth looking for, more time for the group to get to know one another before setting off. And time for the sizable crew of volunteers behind the scenes to iron out any kinks before the cattle drive hit the road.
We got a good crew here. Everybody knows their job and got their job, and it's all good.
Thankfully, after that one wet day, the weather gods really turned it on. And after a very wet summer here, the country is looking particularly beautiful. And what better way to take it all in?
We're usually on the horses by 7. We might get off for 5 minutes for smoko, get back on, go for lunch at about midday. and then back to the yards, well, to the next property, maybe 5 in the afternoon. So they are big days in the saddle.
They crisscross 7 separate properties, some days riding up to 15 kilometres. The youngest on this year's journey is just 7 years old, but they get through it together. Retracing the steps taken by drovers decades ago, when cattle were routinely walked long distances along stock routes to go to the sale yards. The cattle drive centres around one drover in particular, a bloke by the name of Martin Snelling, who still holds a world record for selling the most amount of cattle in one day. In 1932, through the Eidsvold sale yards, Snelling sold a whopping 7,500 head in just 4.5 hours on his own.
And there'll be people out there that say, oh, Roma sells 10,000, but there's a lot of agents there, and they've got, and God bless them, they do a good job. But I mean, this guy was way back in the history.
They'd have travelled through heavily timbered country, and once penned at the yards, they would have needed supplies for the cattle, before once again being walked out to wherever it was they were sold. After Snelling's historic sale, many were walked all the way down to Esk in the Brisbane Valley.
Yet all these cattle came in with drovers. They didn't sort of roll in trucks, and they didn't have hay sitting there and all that sort of thing. So these guys did all this, with drovers. It would have been a big organisation.
Today, the stock routes are still in use, although only from time to time. Bruce Hutchinson owns Tyreen, a station bordering a stretch of the stock route. And while it's hard to picture now with so much fodder available, he says in dry times, these routes remain critical.
Yeah, during the drought there's always cattle on the roads as well as stock routes, quite often. During winter last year it was very dry and they were certainly used. Yes, definitely.
The cattle drive spends one night on Tyreen before moving on. The setup involved in moving camp for a team this size and their animals is quite something. Even with the many hands on deck, it's definitely not light work. What's your role in the cattle drive?
Normally the bus driver, but this year I'm towing the cold room, and my husband is also the treasurer of the committee. So, yeah, we just do whatever needs to be done around the camp.
Paul and Duncan are arguably the most important duo to keep on side. The camp oven cooks are charged with keeping the drovers fed and happy.
It's quite a production. A fair bit goes into it. How long does it take to get it going and, to cook up a meal?
At least 4 hours, probably. Depends what we're cooking, yeah.
And that's every night along the drive you do that?
Yep.
After up to 15 Ks in the saddle each day, the drovers don't really care what's cooking as long as it tastes good.
These guys are unreal what they get out of that pot every night. We're just so excited when we get back at the end of the day.
And sometimes when you're heading home, you're getting close to home and you can just smell the camp oven and it's just starts to brew. It's beautiful.
The cattle drive is run entirely by volunteers. The mob being taken on the road are donated by 3 local families just for the week. And the multiple properties they visit along the journey all agree to hosting the sizable entourage. For many of those behind the scenes, they give up not days but weeks and months of their time for planning and logistics.
It's definitely a team get-together, very much they pull together. We're very much just looked after all the way, so it's wonderful.
The reason so many people are willing to give up so much of their time is simple: the rescue helicopter and flying doctor.
I've had a helicopter trip before which saved my life, so it's probably fairly important.
I've been flown out 3 times before, 2 by the chopper, 1 by the aeroplane. So I had an accident out on a horse and the chopper actually flew out on property. So yeah, it's kind of just given back.
If you live in the city, the concept of being flown out for medical help can seem foreign. But out here, most people have a personal experience with these services.
If you haven't had a trip with the Royal Flying Doctor, if you haven't had a trip in the care flight, you're pretty bloody lucky, you know. But everyone knows somebody who's been evacuated, and so it's important to keep those services going.
The final full day sees the Cattle Drive crew end up just outside town, here at Eidsvold Station. Having covered plenty of country, it's time to cool off and a chance to relax and reflect on the week that was.
It's always pretty nice to pull up and have a beer, and that's part of it too, is the socialising afterwards and that sort of thing, and bringing the community of Eidsvold together, and also highlighting our little community.
Under the moonlight, on a beautiful autumn night, about 200 people celebrate the efforts of those who've helped make this cattle drive happen. Keeping the camp oven cooks very busy indeed. It's country hospitality at its finest. Finally, the finish line is in sight. The crew makes its way from Eidsvold Station into town. The river crossing is a highlight for all involved, and it's easy to see why. From there, the very last leg takes the drovers down the main street, much to the delight of some very special spectators.
When we come into town, one of the important things that we do is we pull up at the hospital, pull the cattle up there, and all the old timers that are in the hospital, all the older people that lived in here all their lives. The hospital staff are very good and bring them out to show them the cattle, and it lifts their spirits. It's really good.
Seeing the drovers command the 450-strong mob of cattle with confidence is a real treat for everyone. They round out the trip back where it all began, but what a difference a week has made.
We went very well. You would have seen us come into the showgrounds there, and a group of professionals couldn't have done it better. They went really well.
Everyone's still in one piece.
Yeah.
We did have a couple of busters early on, but yeah, everyone's made it through, and their horses really improve over the week, and as riders they learn a lot as well.
They've raised an impressive $150,000 to be donated to Life Flight, the Royal Flying Doctor Service and the Burnett Rotary Lodge in Bundaberg. But it's not just about the cash injection they're leaving behind. What they're taking home is far more special.
You kind of get to do this for a week, camping out with them, and so it's pretty unique. So there's a certain level of closeness that comes with that, you know, sees you through the rest of your life, really, when you get those friendships, and it's great.
They've, you know, done the miles with the cattle. Like, they've gone from A and worked their way down to C, and it's just, I think, the satisfaction that, you know, they've done droving.